The flash of cameras almost blinded me as I stood at the press conference podium, my diamond-studded dress glimmering under the lights. The hall was filled with journalists, lawyers, and curious strangers. My voice shook as I spoke into the microphone. My name is Amelia Carter. I was abandoned at birth for love. And now, I paused, the crowd leaning in. Now 100 women have come forward, fighting each other in court, claiming to be my mother. Gasps filled the room. Some reporters scribbled furiously, while others stared at me with open mouths. I glanced to my right where a row of women sat, each one with a different story, a different photo, and a different motive. Their eyes, some teary, some cold, locked onto me like hunters waiting for their prey. My palms trembled on the podium, but my heart was steel. One of the women stood suddenly, shouting, "I'm her real mother. She's lying about all of this." Another woman leapt up to point at her.
No.
"I'm her mother. She's the liar." Chaos erupted. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and my attorney tried to calm them down. I felt my chest tighten as if the air had turned to smoke. I had waited for this day. This was the moment I would unmask them all. The day my revenge would begin. But just as I opened my mouth to reveal the truth, the courtroom doors burst open. A man in a dark suit strode in with a sealed envelope. His eyes locked with mine, and for a second my heart stopped. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, "we need to talk.
Privately.
It's about your real mother." The room went silent. Every face turned to me. My attorney whispered urgently, "Don't go with him. This could destroy everything we planned." But my feet were already moving. My pulse pounded in my ears as I followed the stranger out of the courtroom. And then everything changed. If you're watching this, don't forget to like, watch, and subscribe for more. Because what I'm about to tell you will shock you even more than what you've just heard. My name is Amelia Carter. I was born on a rainy night in a small hospital on the south side of Chicago. My mother didn't stay to hold me.
She didn't even name me.
I later learned she had chosen to leave me for the man she thought would give her the life she wanted, a handsome medical doctor named Dr. Ethan Parker. She walked out of that hospital with him, leaving me behind like a bag of unwanted clothes. The nurses told me later that I was found wrapped in a blue blanket near the hospital gate. It was a janitor named Mrs. Grace Morgan who took me in when the authorities couldn't find my family. She was a widow with a heart bigger than her paychecks. Grace wasn't rich, but she raised me like I was her own blood. She taught me discipline, resilience, and the power of forgiveness, but even she couldn't shield me from the scars of abandonment. I grew up never knowing who my parents were, only that they had chosen someone, over me. And that pain became my drive. By the time I turned 28, I had built one of the biggest health tech companies in the country, a billion-dollar empire built on creating affordable medical equipment for poor communities. Ironically, the very industry my birth mother's lover worked in became the one that made me powerful. My success was my revenge. Or so I thought. It all began to unravel the day I decided to share my story on a national talk show. "Abandoned at birth for love" was the headline. I thought it would inspire others. Instead, it triggered a nightmare. Within a week, letters and phone calls poured in. Women from across the country claimed to be my mother. Some had old baby photos, some had forged birth certificates, some had tears that seemed real. My legal team was overwhelmed. The media called it the 100 Mothers scandal. But underneath the circus of claims, I could feel something darker.
Someone was orchestrating this.
Someone who knew the real truth and wanted to bury it. My instincts told me this wasn't about motherhood. It was about money, power, and secrets that could ruin me. Grace, my guardian, warned me to stay quiet. "Don't open the door to your past," she whispered one night as she folded my laundry like she had when I was a child. "Not everyone who calls you daughter means you well." Her hands trembled as she spoke. I didn't know why, but her fear cut me deep. I tried to ignore it until one of the so-called mothers sent me an email with an old photograph. A photograph of a woman holding a newborn. The woman's face was blurred, but on her wrist was a bracelet I'd seen before. In a magazine. On Dr. Ethan Parker's wife. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was the doctor's wife my mother? Was he my father? Or was someone trying to make me believe that? The next morning, my company's board held an emergency meeting. A leak had hit the press, allegations that my birth mother had secretly been on my company's payroll for years. I had no idea what they were talking about, but the stock price plunged. Investors threatened to pull out. My CFO resigned on the spot. I sat in the boardroom, my hands clenched into fists under the table. "They're trying to destroy me," I muttered. "And they're using my past to do it." One board member, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen Steele, leaned across the table. "Amelia," she said quietly, "you're at war. You just don't know who the enemy is yet." I stared at her. For the first time in my life, I felt like that baby at the hospital gate again, cold, unprotected, and alone. But this time, I wasn't going to cry. I was going to fight. And then the call came, a voice on the other end, low and deliberate. "If you want to know the truth about your real mother, meet me at the courthouse tomorrow. Don't bring anyone." I agreed. Against my attorney's advice. Against Grace's pleas. I needed to know. That's how I ended up at the podium, facing 100 women as my life spiraled out of control. And just as I was about to expose everything, the man in the dark suit appeared with the sealed envelope. When I opened it later, my hands shook so badly the paper tore. Inside was a single photograph, me, as a newborn, in the arms of a woman whose face was hidden, but next to her stood Dr. Ethan Parker, smiling at the camera. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, were 5 words. "She's not who you think." I gasped, dropping the photo. My knees nearly buckled. And before I could even recover, the man in the suit spoke softly. "Miss Carter, we need to leave.
Now.
You're in danger." I turned to my attorney, to the screaming women, to the flashing cameras. My life was spinning. My chest tightened as my heart raced. Was my mother one of these women? Or was she someone else entirely? And then the courtroom doors slammed shut. The man in the dark suit led me through a back hallway of the courthouse, away from the flashing cameras and the shouting of the mothers. His hand was firm on my arm, but not rough. I didn't even know his name. All I knew was that the sealed envelope he had given me had changed everything. "Who are you?" I demanded, my heels clicking against the marble floor. "And what do you mean I'm in danger?" He didn't answer at first. We stepped into an elevator, and the doors slid shut, cutting off the noise from the courtroom. He finally turned to me. "My name is David Monroe. I work for a private investigation firm. Someone hired me to keep you alive." Alive? I almost laughed. "You make it sound like someone wants me dead." His eyes were steady. "They do." The elevator descended in silence. My stomach churned. The picture in the envelope burned in my mind. Dr. Ethan Parker standing beside a woman whose face was hidden. The neat handwriting. "She's not who you think." David led me into an underground parking lot where a black SUV waited. "Get in," he said. I hesitated. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," he replied. "But if you go back up there, you won't make it out of that courthouse." Something in his voice was too calm, too certain to ignore. I climbed in. The SUV pulled out into the street, and only then did I realize how fast my life was spiraling. Yesterday, I was a billionaire CEO fighting to control my company. Today, I was running for my life from people claiming to be my family. I turned to David. "Do you know who my real mother is?" He hesitated. "I know who she isn't." "Then tell me." My voice cracked. "I've spent my whole life wondering." "You'll have your answers," he cut me off. "But first, you need to understand what you're up against." The SUV sped through downtown Chicago. Rain splashed against the windows, making the city blur into streaks of gray and red. David slid a file across the seat to me. Inside were newspaper clippings, bank statements, and photos. My heart stopped when I saw Grace's name, my guardian, on several of the documents. "She's been receiving payments," David said quietly. "Large ones. For years." My fingers went cold. "That's impossible. Grace raised me with nothing. She sacrificed everything." "Check the dates," David said. I scanned them. The payments began the year I turned 18, the same year I started my first company. The amounts grew as my wealth grew. My stomach twisted. Are you saying? Grace sold me. I'm saying someone paid her to keep you quiet, David replied. And now they're afraid you're going to uncover the truth. I stared at the file until the papers blurred. The woman who had been my anchor, my only family, had she been hiding something this big? My chest felt heavy, like I couldn't breathe. I don't believe you, I whispered. Grace isn't like that. David said nothing. He didn't have to. The evidence was right there in my hands. The SUV pulled up to a nondescript office building. David led me inside, past security guards who didn't look like normal guards at all. They looked like soldiers. We entered a dimly lit conference room. On the wall was a giant corkboard covered with photos, strings connecting faces to names, documents pinned at odd angles. In the center of it all was a large picture of me. What is this? I asked. The web, David said. Everyone who's touched your life, every investor, every board member, every woman claiming to be your mother is connected. Someone built this. Someone powerful. I scanned the board. My eyes landed on a photo of Dr. Ethan Parker. A line connected him to a shadowy silhouette marked with a question mark. Another line connected that silhouette to Grace. Another to a symbol I recognized, the logo of my own company. I don't understand, I whispered. You're not just a target, David said. You're key to something worth billions. Before I could speak, the door burst open. Two men in dark jackets rushed in, guns drawn. David shoved me to the ground as shots exploded through the room. Papers and glass flew everywhere. My ears rang as David returned fire. Run, he shouted. I scrambled toward a back exit, heart pounding. Bullets shattered the glass near my head. I ducked and ran, stumbling into a stairwell. David followed, blood on his sleeve, but still moving. We emerged into an alleyway. Rain poured down, mixing with the smell of gunpowder. A black van screeched around the corner, tires screaming. The doors slid open. Inside, I saw a face I never expected to see again, Grace. She looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't name. Guilt?
Fear?
Love? Her voice was steady as she called out over the rain. Amelia.
Get in.
I can explain everything. My feet froze on the wet pavement. David grabbed my arm. Don't, he hissed. She's part of it. Grace reached out her hand. Please, baby girl.
Trust me.
They're lying to you. The van's engine roared. David raised his gun. If you get in that van, you may never come back out. I looked from David to Grace, my heart tearing in two. The woman who had raised me. The man who claimed to protect me. Both telling me opposite things. Both surrounded by lies. Rain dripped down my face. My hands shook. I took a step forward, and the van door slammed shut. Tires screamed. The van lunged toward me at full speed. Everything happened in a flash. The van's headlights burned into my eyes as it hurtled toward me. For a split second, I couldn't move. My body froze, my mind screaming run. David lunged, shoving me hard to the side. We both tumbled onto the wet pavement as the van screeched past where I had just been standing. The driver slammed on the brakes and the van fishtailed before disappearing around the corner, Grace's face vanishing with it. My chest heaved. Rain plastered my hair to my face. David pulled me up, his arm bleeding heavily now. We have to move, he hissed. What just happened? My voice cracked. Was Grace trying to kill me? That's not possible. She's not the woman you think she is, David said flatly. They've been setting this up for years. He dragged me into a dark doorway as two more SUVs sped by, tires splashing water. My head spun. Everything felt unreal, like I had fallen into someone else's nightmare. Grace, the woman who sang me lullabies, who held my hand at every school recital, had just tried to run me over. Or had she been trying to scare me? Or save me from something worse? David pressed a burner phone into my hand. Use this to call no one. Not your lawyers, not your assistants. They're probably compromised. I stared at the phone. Why would anyone compromise my lawyers? Because, he said grimly, this isn't about maternity anymore. It's about control. Whoever controls you controls your company, your wealth, your patents. And right now, they're all slipping out of your hands. We ducked into a side alley that led to an old hotel. Inside, the lobby smelled of cigarette smoke and damp carpet. David booked a room under a fake name. Once the door was shut, I collapsed on the bed, shaking. She raised me, I whispered. She gave up everything for me. Why would she betray me? David sat on the edge of the desk, his gun on his lap. People do terrible things for money, or for power, or to protect secrets. I rubbed my temples. What secrets? He pulled another folder from his bag and tossed it onto the bed. Inside were more documents, birth records, hospital logs, adoption papers. My eyes widened as I saw the name, Amelia Parker, typed on one certificate, the last name crossed out, replaced with Carter. I was Parker? I whispered. You were, David said. Before someone changed it, I flipped through more papers, my heart hammering. One document showed Dr. Ethan Parker listed as my father. Another showed a payment to the hospital the night I was born. The signatures were blurred, but the numbers were staggering. Your birth wasn't just abandonment, David said quietly. It was a transaction. Tears blurred my vision. So, Grace, she was paid to take me? She was paid to raise you and keep quiet, David said. But at some point, someone got nervous you'd find out. That's when the 100 mothers started showing up, noise to cover the truth. My fists clenched. Who started it? We're still tracking that, David said. But whoever it is, they're inside your company. That's why your board is turning on you. I stared at the papers. My whole life felt like a lie. But beneath the grief, something else began to grow. Anger. Cold and sharp. If someone thought they could use my past to destroy me, they were about to learn who they were dealing with. David watched me carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I've been running my whole life, I said slowly. And I'm done running. Whoever did this, whoever's behind Grace, behind the 100 mothers, they think I'm still that abandoned baby at the hospital gate. They're wrong. A knock at the door made both of us jump. David's gun was up instantly. Stay back, he whispered. The knock came again, softer this time. Then a voice. Amelia, it's me. I froze. Grace? David's eyes narrowed. He motioned for me to move away from the door. She tracked you here. She shouldn't even know where you are. Grace's voice trembled. Please, baby girl. Let me explain before it's too late. They're coming for you. You're not safe. David shook his head, mouthing don't trust her. He aimed his gun at the door. My heart pounded. Grace's voice cracked into a sob. Amelia, please. They'll kill you like they killed your father. I stumbled back. My father? David whispered. Don't open it. It's a trap. Grace's voice came again, low and urgent. He didn't abandon you, Amelia. He tried to protect you. They murdered him when he refused to sign the papers.
Please.
Open the door. The room spun. My father murdered? My knees weakened. All my life, I had believed he'd simply chosen someone else over me. But what if that wasn't true? What if everything I knew was wrong? David motioned for me to move away from the door. It's a trick, he hissed. But my hand was already on the doorknob. Amelia, no. David lunged. I yanked the door open. Grace stood there, eyes red, hair wet from the rain, hands trembling. Behind her in the hallway, shadows moved. Men with dark suits, earpieces, and guns. Run, she screamed. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the hotel walls, splinters flying as David pulled me down. Stay low, he barked, returning fire through the doorframe. The hallway echoed with shouting and gunfire. Grace dropped to the floor, crawling toward me. Her face was pale and wet with rain, her hands shaking. Amelia, she gasped. They're here for both of us. We have to go now. David grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the window. We can't hold them off, he shouted. We go out the back now. I'm not leaving her. I cried, but David's grip tightened. Grace coughed, her eyes wide. Listen to me, baby girl. Your father didn't abandon you. He was murdered because of what he knew. The same people who killed him are after you. They're inside your company, inside the government. A bullet shattered the lamp beside us, plunging the room into darkness. David fired 2 more shots. We're leaving. He shoved me toward the bathroom window. Climb out, he ordered. There's a fire escape. Grace grabbed my hand. Her voice broke. Amelia, please. Don't trust anyone. Not even him. The crash of boots in the hallway grew louder. They were seconds away from storming the room.
Now,
David hissed. I scrambled onto the sink and shoved the window up. Cold rain hit my face. My heart raced. Behind me, Grace's voice rose over the chaos. Find the file marked Parker. It's your key. It's the only way to prove. Her scream cut off as the door exploded inward. Men poured into the room, guns raised. David pushed me through the window and followed. We clung to the slick fire escape as the rain hammered down. Below us, sirens wailed. We clattered down the metal steps, the sounds of a struggle echoing from the room we'd just left. I didn't know if Grace was alive or dead. The last thing I'd seen was her reaching for me, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear over the gunfire. David caught my arm as we hit the alley. We have to move. They'll be after us. Tears mixed with the rain on my cheeks. Grace, she knows something. She said my father was murdered. She said there's a file. We'll get it, David said. But first we keep you alive. We ducked into a narrow passageway, winding through back streets until we reached a shuttered warehouse. David pried the door open and ushered me inside. The building was dark and smelled of rust and old wood. He bolted the door and slid down against the wall, breathing hard. I stood in the dim light, soaked and shaking. If what Grace said is true, my whole life has been a lie, I whispered. My father didn't leave me. He was killed. And my mother, my voice cracked. Was she part of it? David looked at me, his jaw tight. We don't know yet, but we'll find out. I pressed my palms to my face, trying to steady my breathing. I want them all exposed. Every single person who did this to me. Every person who used me. That's exactly what they're afraid of, David said. You have power they can't control. Your company's technology, your patents, they're worth more than money. They're leverage. Whoever holds you holds it all. His words burned through me. I thought about my father's face in the photograph, about Grace's screams, about the 100 women claiming me in court. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. I'm not a pawn, I said quietly, and I'm done being their victim. David raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I have resources, I said slowly. People loyal to me. Access they can't block. If they want a war, I'll give them one. But on my terms. David's mouth quirked, just barely. Now you're talking. We sat in silence for a moment, rain dripping from the ceiling. Somewhere outside, sirens faded. The warehouse was still. For the first time in hours, I caught my breath. Then David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. They know we're here. A sharp knock rattled the warehouse door. A male voice called out. Miss Carter? It's Agent Reynolds. FBI. Open up. We're here to protect you. I froze. David stood, gun raised. That's not the FBI, he whispered. They don't announce themselves like that. The knock grew louder. Miss Carter, we know you're in there. Open the door now. David motioned me behind a stack of crates. Stay down, he murmured. This is going to get ugly. The door hinges squealed. Boots scuffed outside. Shadows moved under the crack of the door. My heart pounded. Then a small object rolled under the door, stopping in the middle of the floor. It was a grenade. David's eyes went wide. Down, he yelled. The blast ripped through the warehouse. The explosion slammed me into the crates. Wood splintered, and dust filled the air. My ears rang as I clawed my way up, coughing, smoke stinging my eyes. Somewhere in the haze David was shouting my name. Amelia. Move. I crawled toward his voice, shards of glass biting my palms. The warehouse was a wreck of fire and debris, flames licking at the rafters. David appeared through the smoke, blood on his face, one arm hanging limp but his other hand clutching his gun. "They're coming in," he rasped. "We have to go, now." Through the gaping hole where the door had been, dark figures entered, weapons raised. I felt the heat of the fire on my back. This was it, no more running, no more hiding. "Give yourself up, Miss Carter," one of the men shouted. "We don't want to hurt you." "They're not here to arrest you," David said under his breath. "They're here to erase you." I grabbed a metal rod from the floor and hefted it like a weapon. Then they picked the wrong girl. David's eyes flickered with a brief grin. "Stay behind me. On my mark, we move left." He tossed a smoke grenade from his vest. The room filled with white mist. Gunfire erupted. David fired back, moving like a shadow. I followed, heart pounding, until we burst through a side door into the freezing night air. We stumbled into an alley behind the warehouse. Rain poured down, hissing as it hit the smoldering wreck behind us. In the distance, sirens wailed. Real ones this time. We ducked under an overhang, gasping for breath. David leaned against the wall, clutching his side. "We can't keep running like this," he said hoarsely. "We need to strike back." I stared at him, my fists trembling. "Grace said there was a file marked Parker. She said it's my key. If we can find it, maybe we can prove everything. My father's murder. The conspiracy. All of it." David's gaze sharpened. "Where would she keep it?" "Somewhere they wouldn't think to look," I murmured. "Somewhere only she and I would know." A memory flickered, a hidden compartment in Grace's old sewing box, the one she never let me touch. As a child, I had once pried it open and found an envelope full of photos. She had snatched it away before I could see. "I know where it is," I whispered, "but we'll have to go back to her house." "That's suicide," David said. "They'll be watching it." "I don't care," I said. "I'm done running. If that file is there, it's the proof I need to expose them. And when I do," my voice hardened, "I'll destroy them." David studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we plan it right." 2 nights later, we sat in a stolen car outside Grace's old bungalow on the south side of Chicago. The street was dark and wet, the only sound the hiss of rain on asphalt. The house looked the same as it always had, peeling paint, sagging porch, but my gut told me it was no longer just a home. It was a trap. David passed me a small earpiece. "I'll cover the front. You slip in through the back. Get the file, and get out." My hands shook as I put the earpiece in. "If she's there, trust your instincts," he said quietly. "But remember, they're playing a deep game. Grace might still be trying to protect you. Or she might be the bait." I nodded and slipped out of the car. The rain masked my footsteps as I crept around the back of the house. The kitchen window was still loose, just like I remembered. I eased it up and climbed inside. The smell of lavender and old wood hit me, a rush of childhood memories. My heart ached. On the kitchen table sat a cup of tea still steaming. Someone was here. I moved quickly through the house to Grace's bedroom. The old sewing box sat on her dresser. My fingers hovered over it. My breath caught. In my earpiece, David's voice whispered, "You have company." 2 men just entered through the front. I snapped open the sewing box. Under spools of thread and needles was the hidden compartment. Inside lay a thick envelope marked Parker. "I've got it," I whispered. "Then get out now," David hissed. I turned toward the window, but the bedroom door creaked open. Grace stood there, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "Amelia," she said softly, "put the file down." I clutched it to my chest. "Is it true?" My voice shook. "Did you sell me?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I saved you," she whispered. "I took their money, so I could protect you. I've been protecting you your whole life." "Protecting me?" My voice rose. "You lied to me. They killed your father," she said, her voice breaking. "He tried to stop them. I was next. I took you and ran. I only took their money to keep you hidden, to keep you safe. Please believe me." My heart wavered. For a moment, she looked like the woman who had tucked me in at night, who had patched my scraped knees. But then her eyes flicked to the window behind me, and I realized she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. "They're here," she whispered. Two men stepped into the room behind her, guns raised. One of them smirked. "End of the line, Miss Carter." Grace moved in front of me. "Run," she hissed. "I'm not leaving you," I said. David's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Amelia, jump out the window, now." But I didn't move. My knuckles tightened on the file. My pulse thundered. This was the moment. No more running. No more hiding. If I jumped, they'd kill Grace. If I stayed, they'd kill me. The man closest to me lifted his gun.
And I swung.
I swung. My fist connected with the man's jaw and he stumbled back, dropping his gun. The other man lunged at me, but David was faster. He knocked him down with the butt of his weapon. Grace screamed and pushed past us, falling to her knees beside the fallen man. Her hands were shaking, her face pale, but her eyes were fierce. "We have to move," David hissed as police sirens grew louder outside. "They'll be here in 2 minutes." I clutched the Parker file to my chest like it was a sword. It felt heavy, with every secret it held. My breathing was fast and hot, but my mind was clear. This was the moment I had waited for. The moment I would stop being a toy in someone else's game. David shoved the men into chairs and used their cuffs to hold them. He ripped out one of the men's phones and fed it into his pocket. "They won't get much from these two," he said. "But they're connected. We'll get what we need from them." He looked at me, exhausted but steady. "You do the talking, Amelia. You're the one with the file." I opened the envelope. Inside were hospital receipts, payment slips, and a stack of old pictures. One picture chilled me. The newborn photo with Dr. Ethan Parker standing beside the woman whose face had been hidden. On the back of that picture was handwriting. "Make sure she never finds out. Keep Amelia safe and quiet.
EP."
Another paper showed a hospital ledger with a note. "Baby number 7. Transferred to Grace Morgan. $5,000 received." A check stub bore Dr. Parker's signature. Bank transfers followed. There were also a series of recorded voice notes David had recovered from one of the men's devices, men talking about control, patents, and the Carter Project. The voices were low, but one of them was unmistakable. I played it. The voice said, plainly and cruelly, "Once she has the patents, we own the gates. We own the town hospitals." My stomach rolled. They had not only stolen my childhood, they had built a plan to steal everything I worked for. "How did you get these?" I asked Grace, who crouched nearby, watching me with eyes full of shame and love. She reached out and touched the photo of me as a baby. "Your father tried to stop them," she said in a voice that sounded like it had been used for the last time. "He found the proof. He wanted to tell the board. He wanted to tell the public. They scared him. They made it look like an accident. I took you and ran because I promised him I would keep you safe. I took their money because I had no other way. I thought I was saving you." Tears blurred my vision. Rage and sorrow warred inside me. "You lied to me," I said. "You let me believe I had no one. You let the world tear me apart with 100 voices." Grace bowed her head. "I thought silence would do it. I was wrong." Outside, we heard the pounding of boots as police and men in suits flooded the street. Someone shouted, "Police! Everyone get down." The 2 men we'd cuffed were dragged away. David handed their phones and evidence to an arriving detective who introduced himself as Detective Marcus Hayes. He listened, then nodded once. "Good work. We have warrants. We'll need statements," he said. "But there's more here than just a robbery. We're opening a homicide cold case and a corporate fraud investigation tonight." I felt something like cold water splash over me. Homicide. Corporate fraud. That was the hole I had been trying to fill my whole life. The next days unfolded like someone else's fever dream. News vans lined the block as the police carted evidence from warehouse to station. My board was frozen in crisis mode. Karen Steele and 2 other board members were placed on immediate leave pending investigation. Dr. Ethan Parker was arrested at his home. His calm, perfect life shattered. The 100 women who had stormed my first press conference were exposed by the investigation as paid claimants or beneficiaries of shell companies connected to Parker and his associates. The mother circus was, in large part, smoke and mirrors to cover the real theft. I sat in a small conference room at my company while Detective Hayes and David laid out the timeline. The files showed payments from Dr. Parker to hospital staff, to private investigators, even to a shell company that funneled money to several women who later stood in court claiming to be my mother. The recordings captured boardroom meetings where Karen Steele and Parker plotted to dilute my ownership and obtain my patents through forced buyouts and legal smokescreens. It was so clean, so planned, that it made my skin crawl. They had used my past like a weapon to destroy my credibility and take my company. They had killed my father because he would not sell out. They had used Grace to hide me, then used her to control me. I thought of every lonely night I had spent wondering why I was abandoned. Now I understood the price someone had paid to keep me quiet. I decided to end it the only way I knew how, publicly and permanently. 2 weeks later, I called a press conference. This time there were no theatrics, no dramatic reveals without proof. I had everything: bank transfers, hospital ledgers, recorded conversations, and DNA results. The DNA test was simple but decisive. A preserved newborn heel prick card had been found in the hospital archive, evidence of my birth. Our lab compared it to Dr. Ethan Parker. The result was clear. He was not my father. The real father's identity was redacted in the files to protect the man who had tried to expose the scheme. But the paper trail painted a portrait of greed and cruelty that could not be erased. I stepped to the podium. Cameras flashed. I felt a strange calm. The woman on the screen that day was not the scared baby by the hospital gate. She was a woman who had learned to turn pain into power. "My name is Amelia Carter," I said. My voice did not shake. I was abandoned at birth for love. That love led people to make choices that destroyed lives. Today, we know the truth. I played the recordings. The room went silent as cold voices spoke of patents and takeover plans. I showed pages of wire transfers. I held up the photo of the newborn with Dr. Parker in the background. I spoke their names plainly: Dr. Ethan Parker, Karen Steele, and I explained, in simple words, what they had tried to do. When I finished, reporters shouted questions. But the damage was done. Law enforcement moved. The stock market reacted. My company's shares fell the day before but steadied as investors saw clarity and decisive action. The board members who betrayed me were arrested or resigned. The men in suits who thought they could buy my silence were led away in cuffs. In the weeks that followed, I sat with Grace for long talks. She told me every truth she could remember: how the payment had started, how my father begged her to keep me safe, and how he came to a meeting the night he was killed. He had walked into a trap. He had called Grace in the hospital parking lot, whispering that they were going to expose the fraud. He never left. I cried for him then, for the man I had never known but who loved me enough to try. I forgave Grace, not because she deserved it without question, but because the woman who had cared for me had also carried the weight of my life. She had failed, and she had saved me. I held her hand and told her we would rebuild together. Justice came in its slow, imperfect way. Dr. Parker and Karen Steele were indicted on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. The men who murdered my father were brought to trial. Some were convicted. Others hid behind clever lawyers and plea bargains. Not everyone got the punishment I wanted, and that truth cut me more than any lie. But the main players were stopped. As for the 100 mothers, most of them were people I never knew, bought and coaxed into the lie by money and the promise of favors. A few were real women who had once loved the man who left me at the hospital. They had been used by the conspirators and were now stunned when the truth came out. I met one of them in a small cafe months later. She cried when she learned what had happened. She had not wanted to be part of the lie. She was, in her small way, another victim. The final twist, the professional turn I had promised myself, came in court. I presented a plan to my board and to the public. My company would create an independent trust to protect the medical patents and ensure they were used for the communities my father had wanted to serve. No one could ever weaponize what we had built again. I signed paperwork, gave up a portion of my control, and watched as investors and communities both breathed easier. The revenge was not to crush them with money or violence. The revenge was to take my work back and use it to do good. On a late summer evening, I stood on the balcony of the same house where Grace had once tucked me in as a child. The city lights glittered like tiny promises. David sat in a chair across from me, quieter now, less haunted. Grace slept inside on a couch, her hand on a blanket with my childhood initials embroidered on it. I thought of my father, of the humiliation and pain, of the 100 mothers and the empty lies they used to try to steal me. I thought of every night I had spent wondering who I was. I am still Amelia Carter. I was abandoned at birth for love. Now I carry the truth like armor and forgiveness like a tool. I rebuilt what they tried to break and turned it into something better than what they imagined. The world watched.
Some cheered, some judged.
But finally, the story was mine, not the markets or the conspirators. I had my name back, my work back, and a clear way forward. I do not pretend everything is perfect. The scars remain. I still wake sometimes at night with the old fear. But I have found a family in Grace, and in people who stayed when the lights went out. I have a purpose that is louder than their lies. And if anyone ever thinks they can buy the truth, well, they learned the hard way.